Professor Antônio José Bacelar da Silva has a PhD from the University of Arizona, and he finished his PhD in 2012. He has also received a master's in second language studies from the University of Hawaii in Manoa. And then he went back to, because you are from Brazil, correct? From Salvador?
Correct.
Yes. And went back there with CAPES and worked at the Federal University of Bahia, Salvador, where he worked in very interesting research related to elections and the opinions, and that was mainly with CAPS, correct, as a scholar?
Correct, and also, yeah, in Wenner Gran, which is the foundation for anthropological research, right?
Yes, and you stayed there for until you returned to the University of Arizona.
Correct.
As an assistant professor currently
Correct.
in the Center for Latin American Studies. So his research is, as we have had the opportunity to see last semester, it really deals with issues that we have been discussing, equity related to gender, race, and, your focus is mainly cultural anthropology, political studies. It deals with topics that are very important for us with the issues that we are dealing right now. And he has developed a course, Black Lives Matter Across the Americas, Race and Racism Across Latin America. And this, Latin American topics describing how race and racism has been perceived and experienced in countries in Latin America, particularly such as Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia, where a mixed race ideology and the myth of racial equality has this myth has traditionally been the core of national identity. So in the class that he has developed, the class that he's going to give now critically analyzes notions of race and anti-racist activism, and to examine the ideologies and circumstances of the political structure, race-targeted public policies, and Black activism in contemporary Latin America. But it deals also with issues here related to the United States. And he has an upcoming book that's going to be published by Rutgers University Press, and the title is Between Black and Brown, Anti-Racist Activism Among Afro-Brazilians. So it's really related to what you're going to talk to us today, correct?
Correct. And the good news is that I just submitted the full manuscript to Rutgers University Press. So I feel more relaxed now.
Oh my God, that's nice. So it is, do you know exactly when it's coming out?
Spring next year.
Great. Yeah. It's a lot of work when you get to that point. Yes.
Yeah, early spring, yes.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So, I've been also working on it, if students are interested, on conviviality. That's my new racist humor and conviviality in Brazil. So there's going to be a new article coming out in the Canadian Anthropologica, right? The paper. So that's going to be out soon. And I look at how the Brazilian use of racist jokes, right? Subtle, sometimes not so subtle. And that's the other thing that that's my new, one of my new, and it has to do with language, right? Language. And so the topic today is about language. Um, um, Racist language, right? Yeah.
Can you give us an example of some of
Well, something that this paper is about Paulo Guedes when he talked about maids going to Disney. Remember that? Do you remember that scene that Paulo Guedes says that na era de Lula, até empregada ia para Disney?
Exactly. Yeah.
yes.
Remember that? There was so I do a Bakhtin analysis of that as a iron, or Bakhtin calls reduced laughter, to argue that first it was a joke, it was ironic, was irony with this reduced laughter, and then it's part of the Brazilian, this license that Brazilians have to make these jokes, even for a public figure. We're talking about the Minister of Finance under Jair Bolsonaro, right?
Correct.
And
I
then I
know
put that into
Jerry.
the context. Yeah, but that's we can talk about that in the future, right?
Mhm.
That
I
That's
specific part.
interesting.
think the,
Jerry,
Today is
the
the language of anti-racism.
yeah,
yes.
yeah, I
Jerry
think
just post,
the
something like one of the, a quote, uma festa danada, não é? Probably related to the,
Exactly. I use
yeah,
that to show he says a hell of a party. He says a festa danada. Yeah, right, Lucia. I use that as I do.
well, that's Jared put it on the chat. That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I also do, the second focus of the article is the backlash. How you saw that Benedita da Silva went right in Congress to respond to what he did. And so it caused a whole commotion in the country, a huge backlash to his, because Brazilians are not, my argument that there is a change there. People are not accepting that kind of racist language anymore. You know what I mean? Especially public like that, like used to be. So I see a change underway in the way Brazilians accept, because of all the anti-racist momentum that going on in the country. So people are becoming more aware of these things, right? Um, Maybe I'm being a little optimistic, but yeah, that's what I show how people are reacting to these things now in the public sphere, not alone. Yeah, but we can again. This is not exactly the topic we're going to be what we're going to be talking today, but we will. I can come back and talk about it.
Excellent.
So
Okay.
can we start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I want to thank you for inviting me again, right? For working, help me, work on this collaboration with your department, and it's a pleasure. And I hope in the future this can be done in person in the near future, right?
Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, maybe next year after the vaccine, we'll love, Isis and I would love to invite you to give a talk at the Office of Diversity and Inclusion.
yeah,
Perfect.
and bring many of the speakers that we are having this semester to create a sort of a mini seminar with workshop. So these are the dreams. They
Okay,
they
great.
they come to fruition.
So, and also I want to thank everyone here who's coming to participate. This talk, this is going to be actually a workshop, right? And I'm trying to replicate something that I do with my students in Black Lives Matter across the Americas. And we usually work in this, we have these collaborative learning spaces, and I teach using this collaborative model that um, this class happens towards, I think, the 2/3 of the way in the semester, and the class is taught in the fall. And as you know, November 20th is Black Consciousness Day in Brazil, correct? So what we do is, as part of our Brazilian Studies program, we hold, and this is very ambitious, but we do it, we've been doing for a few years now, we hold right in the middle of Yovei on the mall, right, which is like the public square, right? the main square at UVA, we hold the Brazilian Black Consciousness Day there. And with events and with capoeira, with music, Brazilian food, etc. And so the last time that we did this, the students were active, helped put this together, right? And the culmination of this particular class is students making signs to plant those signs in the mall around campus, right? With anti-racist language and teachings and tips and some how to be anti-racist. So this is the culmination of this after they've been learning a lot about race, racism, et cetera, and then we have this event on November 20th. So they work in groups to help build these signs that will decorate the mall. So this is what I'll be. So it's workshop style. We'll be doing. It's really like task based. We'll be doing tasks here, and see what language of anti-racism is about, right? Feel free to, as any classroom, feel free anytime to ask questions, to make comments, right? We can do this as a workshop, like a big conversation, right? We don't have to wait until the end for questions and answers. So the language of anti-racism. I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is MV Bill's song, Contraste Social, right? So we're gonna listen to the song. So I have a few tasks here. Listen while following the words. I'm gonna play it. And then the words are in Portuguese, so you might need some, help with translation, but we can do that as we talk, right? And as we analyze this song. And these are the tasks, the three tasks that I have. One is individually, you'll listen to the song and follow with the words, and then select a passage. Can be a verse, can be several verses, right? That struck you in some way. It might be one that resonates with your own experience, that reminds you of it reminds you of something, sorry, there's a typo there, of something else you've read or seen, or that makes an important point, right? And so the song is available online. You'll see it, but you'll be able to find it on letras.com. And then I would like to do a breakout room in which you, in small groups, you will reflect on why you thought that passage was to you the one that, that jumped on you, right? Okay, so let's, here is can you all see the words?
Contraste social, we see contraste social. So I see that it's a hyperlink, but...
Oh yeah, so what I'll do is I have to change the...
sometimes you have to close the PowerPoint, open the...
Right. I have to stop sharing and then to share this other page. Okay. Close these ads. Can you all see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so let's play and can you all hear it?
Yes.
Rio de Janeiro, morre asfalto, favela e condomínio, contraste social. Eu quero denunciar o contraste social. Enquanto o rico vive bem, o povo pobre vive mal. Cidade maravilhosa é uma grande ilusão. Desemprego, pobreza, miséria, corpos no chão. As crianças da favela não têm direito ao lazer. Governantes só falam e nada querem fazer. O posto de saúde é uma indecência. Só atende se o caso for uma emergência. A sociedade capitalista com sorriso aberto. Rir de longe é melhor do que sofrer de perto. Miséria e morte é o nosso dia a dia. Pelo menos entre nós não existe ajudaria. Um amigo estudou, não teve oportunidade, brigou, lutou por sua dignidade. Mais uma vez, por falta de opção, o seu trabalho foi na boca como a 9 na mão. Ele queria um dia voltar atrás. Infelizmente esse amigo já não vive mais. Se ele tivesse uma chance podia ser trabalhador. Como não teve para o inferno, alguém lhe mandou. Contraste social, o povo pobre é quem vive mal. Eles querem negão dentro da prisão. Contraste social, o povo pobre é quem vive mal. Eles querem negão dentro da prisão. Estouraram na boca do fogo, o traficante é preso. Para a alegria da polícia, o traficante é preto. Na cadeia com certeza vai passar muito tempo, mas se tivesse dinheiro teria um justo julgamento. No país onde o dinheiro domina, família faz da praça a sua morada. A política é movida através de propina. Um inocente é condenado sem ter feito nada. E assim vamos fazendo o que diz a bandeira. Ordem e progresso no país de terceiro mundo. Não queremos ser tratados de qualquer maneira, como se todos na favela fossem vagabundos. Quem está por cima não esquenta não. Ri de nós e joga urso para o mundo cão. 27 de janeiro de 1994, uma mulher com as costas cheias de buraco estava parada com a filha na fila do orelhão. Recebeu pelas costas 2 tiros de bagulhão. A filha ficou ferida e a mãe morreu. Mas um fato ocorrido na cidade de Deus, o mesmo não acontece na zona sul. Não foi bandido que matou, tava com a farda azul. Não quero fazer sensacionalismo, apenas te mostrar que a gente vive na beira do abismo. Contraste social, o povo pobre é quem vive mal. Eles querem negão dentro da prisão. Contraste social, o povo pobre é quem vive mal. Eles querem negão dentro da prisão. O coletivo do favelado agora é arrastão. Discriminado na rua, na praia, na condução. A televisão esquece da pobreza, impondo a playboyzada como padrão de beleza. Por isso que muito cara fica revoltado com o sistema que deixa os pobres acorrentados. Deve ser muito fácil falar da cobertura daqui de baixo onde eu tô. A realidade é bem mais dura. Aqui não tem playground, não tem carro do ano. Aqui não tem piscina com playboy nadando. Aqui não tem shopping, não tem boate, mas tem soldado de azul brincando de SWAT. Tem água de esgoto passando na rua. Tem gente sem casa, dormindo na chuva. Aqui não tem lazer, não tem quadra de basquete. A pelada é no CIEP. Porrada que a gente levava no tronco, agora levamos na rua e pronto. Ficamos com a boca fechada porque não queremos ir para o inferno. Te mando pro saco dentro do buraco, esse é o mundo moderno. Tiro de 12, metralhadora, e se acabou. A vida de mais um irmão que pelos direitos reclamou. Fique ligado, nada mudou, veja o que se passou. Chibatada que a gente levava no tronco não cicatrizou. Se você não se ligou, se liga então, nada mudou. Se na sua cabeça eu estou equivocado, desça da cobertura e passe aperto do meu lado. Contraste social, o povo pobre é quem vive mal. Eles querem negão dentro da prisão. Contraste social, o povo pobre é quem vive mal. Eles querem negão dentro da prisão.
Okay. I'm stop sharing, go back to the PowerPoint. Hold on a second. I have to go back to that website. There you go. So let me go back here to the PowerPoint. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is you might be able to access the words of the song online. And there is a way on Google Chrome to translate the song, the words. And so let me know if you need help with that. So
Andrew just sent
so
the link.
everybody has access to the content of the song, right? Again, if you open this song in the Google Chrome, you are able to translate it.
And what do we know about the translation? Because I'm looking at it myself, and one of the lines that jumped out at me toward the end, I'm not sure if this is really a good translation to English.
Are you using the Google Chrome?
No, passaporte do meu lado, right? So get off the cover and squeeze by my side. I thought that's maybe more expression. The literal translation there, we need like get out of the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like come down from your penthouse and suffer here with me, like experience life from my side of it.
Yeah, there it is, right. Mm-hmm.
So you have the right words, right? The lyrics?
Yeah.
Okay. So individually, I would like you to go over those words and pick. I just found some, every time I listen to this, I found something new about the, now I'll just focusing on the okay, I'm not gonna say which one I picked. So pick one segment, right, of it. And then we'll go into small groups to talk about the segment you picked, why you picked it, and then we can come back and have a quick conversation with the whole group, right? Some of you may be able to share what you talked about in small groups. Is that clear?
Yes.
Don't say you want to create the groups yourself as co-host?
Yes, I can do that. But if you want to do it, you know, fine too.
Or Jared, please do this for us.
You just have to put me as co-host. Right now, I'm just like a participant. I don't know how that works because this is like my Zoom, but
yeah, it's very simple. Anybody who's there, just go down to more and then break them out into groups, and however many groups, how many of us want to be in the groups? 2, 3, however many.
Jonathan, you can do it. Oh no, you're a guest. Sorry, I thought you were a co-host.
So usually groups 4 or 5 maximum. Usually more become more productive, right? So yeah.
Everybody. I have to step out for a second, so put me in any group you want.
Okay. How many are we all together? 32. Mm-hmm. Like 7 groups, right? Or something. Mm-hmm.
We did not go to groups.
So I think we'll do is, we should be able to do this in between 5 and 7 minutes. We can bring them back.
Yeah. I was trying to find a good translation. Eu estava procurando uma tradução boa em inglês da música, mas pelo menos rapidinho assim eu não encontrei nada. You are on mute, Jonathan.
I'm sorry, I had a little kitchen emergency.
Burnt your hand?
Yeah, but that's okay. I'm a better cook.
You're probably sent into some room, Jonathan. And Rafael and Caitlin are probably in another dimension. That's when we know. Rafael, I actually have his WhatsApp. Rafael, vai para o grupo.
Eu fui, mas me quicaram para fora. Não sei o que aconteceu. Eu estou no grupo da Michelle.
Te quicaram para fora?
Ou o Zoom quicou, não sei. Eu vou tentar entrar de novo, então. Peraí.
Oh, meu Deus, isso não é aceitável.
Não, mas não. Foi o sistema aqui. Vou tentar de novo, então.
E a Caitlin, eu não sei quem é. É estudante.
She's from U of A. A professor from U of A.
A Holly está chegando agora. Vamos mandar a Holly para algum grupo, vamos ver.
Let's give him 5 more minutes. Then we can. So 5 more minutes, right? And then we can bring them back?
Sim. Eu achei curioso no começo que tem o som da igreja, né, o sino, a badalada, o berimbau, então os dois puxando, né, e daí o som da sirene da cidade, né? Então, todas cosmologias ali, daí
É interessante que essa música é da década de 90, né? Então, a parte que me chamou a atenção dessa vez, ele fala dos policiais vestidos de azul, está falando da...
Eu escrevi isso, soldado de azul brincando de SWAT.
Que é a polícia de choque, né? Como é no Brasil, né? E hoje em dia o movimento Blue Lives Matter, né? Que é a vida dos policiais, né? Os conservadores que fazem crítica ao Black Lives Matter.
Não, algumas coisas, eu passei aquele videozinho que você me deu do Reverse Racism, and that does a great job. Não, 3 minutos.
A gente vai falar um pouco sobre isso hoje, quando falar sobre slang. Yeah.
Eu ainda não tive tempo de assistir a série da PBS que você recomendou, ainda quero chegar lá. Mas White Privilege é outro, que toda vez a gente vai recebendo material para ajudar na explicação disso, mas também é um negócio que às vezes emperra ali, que pessoas ficam... E nisso a Djamila tá bem na... Você conseguiu? Você teve chance de ler esse livro?
É quase que uma cartilha, né? É ótimo.
Bem acessível e numa coisa, olha, todo mundo é racista, tá? Ok? Combinado? Então vamos partir daí. Não é uma coisa...
Alguma coisa da ação, de tomar... Né, de ação, de fazer alguma coisa. Não adianta só falar, né?
Nessa série do Letramentos dela, tem um que é o que é racismo recreativo, que eu acho que cai no humor.
E é de... qual é o nome dele? Adilson Moreira, não é isso?
Eu acho que é.
Racismo recreativo de Adilson Moreira.
Silvia Almeida, né? Não, esse é o estrutural. Eu acho que é isso mesmo. Eu coloquei no...
Moreira. Uhum.
É,
muito bom também.
Eu estou recomendando para o menino que saiu agora, Rafael, que ele está trabalhando com as comédias, as novas comédias brasileiras, para falar da...
Inclusive, esse de Adilson Moreira tem uns 2 YouTubes, ele falando sobre o livro dele. Ele dá acho que 5 minutos, muito bom. Bote Adilson Moreira, bote racismo recreativo. Deixa eu ver quantos minutos mais aqui. Mais 1 minuto a gente traz o pessoal de volta.
Mensagem, né? A broadcast message to all. Já mandou?
Mande, dizendo que daqui a 1 minuto a gente vai trazê-los de volta.
We will be bringing you back in 1 minute. Acho que agora vou colocar close all rooms, porque demora 1 minuto para fechar.
Tá.
Eu tenho que mudar essa... 60 seconds.
Eu não Okay. Are we all back? No, close. No.
Começaram a voltar.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Agora sim. Welcome back.
I think you're ready, right? 32?
Agora...
So I think we can, sorry if sometimes the translations are not that precise, right? Especially in terms of lyrics, I think. If anybody would like to comment, let me say that this song is from the 90s, early 90s, right? MVBO, one of his first albums.
I think the phrase that I saw that meant something to me was "Para a alegria da polícia, o traficante é negro." The Rivera book has a lot to say about that. That the drug laws are such that there's a big difference in penalty between possession and trafficking. And if you're black, you get accused of trafficking. If you're white, it's possession. So quite a difference in how people are imprisoned as a result of that.
Right.
I'm saying it'd be a big difference between drug activity in the favela and some white fraternity at the university.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Para a alegria do policial, which is the...
They're delighted to be able to do that, to persecute black people.
Yeah, right.
In our group, one of the lyrics that stood out to us was kind of the repetition of this idea of the whipping block kind of idea. So the first one is the porrada que a gente levava no tronco, agora levamos na rua e pronto. And then following up with chibatada que a gente levava no tronco não cicatrizou. So kind of pulling this historical image of like that idea of like the pelourinho, the whipping post that they used to punish anybody who was disobedient for whatever reason, specifically Black people who were disobedient. You know, white folks weren't getting the chibatada in the middle of the square. So this pulling of the historical context to the current thing, you know, we never got over the damages from that, and now it's just a different form of the same thing.
Right, right. Exactly. Anybody else would like to? One more, and then we can.
In my group, we talked specifically, well, I brought up the line, Cidade Maravilhosa e uma Grande Ilusão. Like, the nickname of Rio, obviously, is like Cidade Maravilhosa. And we talked about how this song works to deconstruct the myth of this title, because like this phrase is used to attract tourists. It's part of like so many songs that are sung about Rio, but in reality, like this just isn't true for millions of people who live there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So what I do ask my students, so why do you think I played this song for you guys? You know what I mean? Why is this, why do I open the workshop with this song? Right? Anybody want to try? It's from the 90s, as I said, right? I could kind of give a tip.
I believe it's because, I mean, we still deal with this kind of stuff in 2021.
Right. And justify why we are here today, right? Unfortunately, right? Yeah. This is why we're doing this workshop today. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But let's get more into the language part now. Let me share the PowerPoint again. So, language and race. How our mom spotted the extremist messaging. You'd be surprised when this was published and that we were going to be talking about this today, right? So what I'd like you to do is to look for this reading, A Mother's Warning. If you have white teen sons, listen up, right? See if you all can find that reading. It's on CNN News. Let me click to show you what it looks like. Click. Stop sharing and then share again. This is what it looks like. Did you all find it?
It's in the chat now.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a short reading, but so take some time to read it. I'm going to stop sharing now since you all have the reading, the text. Do you need more time? I think so. One thing you can do is when you're done, you can raise your hand using the little thing to raise your hand, and we can all see on the I see 3, 4, 5 hands. Yeah, lots of hands. Great. Okay. So let's see. Show of hands here. Okay. Great. So, did you learn anything new there?
The interesting thing is how, that I found about it, is how social media has potentialized these kind of conversations. The fact that these ideas are being spread to teenagers doesn't surprise me so much. I grew up in a small conservative, hardline evangelical town, and through high school, these kind of jokes and some of the terms she mentions were common among especially teenage boys joking around. But it would be very easy, especially with how we know Instagram and Twitter and these things have such strong effects on, especially on developing brains. It's very easy for students who, when I was in high school 15 years ago, it was a joke and most people were able to move on from it and not stick with it. But now, especially, it's so present that people are actually going to start developing this as part of their identity, and it's going to use social media to create more racist people. They're going to be more racist than they already would be in participating in our racist structure. So we need to find a way to use social media to spread anti-racist material to these folks and help people realize it.
And right, and the key thing is through language, right? The power of language. I'm a linguistic anthropologist, so it really fascinates me how these expressions can really, as you said, can create the racists, right? The white supremacists, right? In very subtle ways, but then it does it, right? So this is, I just want to give a sense of the whole thing of language and why it's important to think about language. Why is it important to think the words that you use or what you hear, right? Anybody else would like to jump in and say something about?
I'm fascinated about the use of emojis and the expressions. Some of them, of course, the glass of milk, I follow. Snowflake, I guess I can, but some of it, like I have no idea what blood and soil, what is that about? Jonathan seems to know. You are on mute, Jonathan.
Yeah, but now I feel like that 13-year-old boy who's been singled out online for knowing what blood and soil might be. So there's that.
They have definitions.
I have the nodding disease, but yeah, that's a trope? It's a fascist trope, right?
Yeah, Nazi reference, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, yes.
Well, they have definitions of each of the terms on the sidebar because I had to read them because I didn't know what anything was.
Right.
The sidebar?
Yeah, it's like in bold on the left-hand side of the article as you scroll down, kind of.
And Trump used that trope of blood and soil when he says to be strong, right?
Yes.
He didn't exactly use these two words, but people knew what he was saying.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where it goes. I mean, I know that trope in one shape or another can be found in biblical traditions. So And so it's not like 1920s and 30s European fascism invented that trope, like most tropes, right? They were borrowed from previous usages. But that's what I think it means online for a lot of North American audiences. It's a pledge of allegiance to a certain kind of fascist ideology, as they understand whatever that is, right? It's very nebulous. Very nebulous in terms of ideas. It's certainly very concrete and material in terms of the actions that they're willing to take. But
did you guys get the half cop thing? The haircut of the guy in Charlottesville? Yeah, that was fascinating too, and that became right. And we'll look at something later now, but how what's going on at Reddit now, right?
What about the haircut?
The guy, the white supremacist that was in Charlottesville that had a haircut that was looked like a half cop, right? The haircut.
I never noticed that. Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me, besides just the language, and I read this article, when it came out, and I have a 15-year-old son, and it put some red flags up for me. But I read a follow-up article that also talked about the algorithms and the coding that goes into like YouTube and Facebook and how they suck these young boys and people in, right? It's all about keeping them on the screen, and how the language is connected to the coding and the people that are doing the coding, which are overwhelmingly white males, right? And then creating these algorithms to keep you on and keep clicking and keep watching the videos, and how, like I said, the language and the coding and the algorithms and the software are all kind of part and parcel and reinforcing these racist tropes, right? And promulgating them and popularizing them, right? It's scary.
Right.
And if I may just intervene a little bit very quickly, for everyone who has kids right now and teenagers, also pay attention to the games they're playing online. I was surprised by it when I have a brother who's 10 years younger than me, so I could follow him into that rabbit hole and point some things out for him. But it seems that it's even worse than it was 3 years ago. So that's another thing, like besides social media, also the online games, and it doesn't look like much. They're just clicking on colorful things, but the chats that they're having in those groups. And also I remember for those games, the shooter games, I don't know, the shooter games, the army gaming shooting thingy, the US Department of Defense was running recruitment operations in those games. And it was just recently, I think someone decided that they cannot do that any longer, but they just had like recruiters playing the game and trying to attract young people to enlist.
And I think it's successful too. There were some documentaries a while ago on veterans from the Afghan War, and it was heartbreaking to see 19-year-old soldiers being interviewed, and the reason why they wanted to go was to have access to all the guns that they'd seen on games and to be able to use them. Anecdotal, but very heartbreaking.
Like when you were in groups, we were left without groups, Tonse and I, and the line that we were talking about in the song refers precisely to that, is soldiers in blue playing SWAT. Yeah.
And the idea of a democratic police force or a military force, if those can exist, would be exactly the opposite, that you shouldn't be recruiting your soldiers or your police officers as the people who want to shoot people. They should be the people who are least desiring to pull a weapon on someone and use it against somebody. They should be the folks who are most resistant to using force unless it's absolutely necessary. So it violates that entirely. I mean, you even think of like when they recruited soldiers in Vietnam in this country, what the psychological assessment was, do you want to kill people? And if people claimed they wanted to do that, supposedly they were removed from the draft because they were considered psychologically unfit.
Right.
Well,
okay, I think you. Anybody else want to say something?
Oh, sorry.
Sophia?
No, all I was just going to say, it's a little bit going back a little bit.
just like about like social media stuff and seeing that play out, and not to be like, I don't know, I do social media stuff in Brazil, like I've got a decent amount of followers, and not to be like, oh, it's so hard for me to be so popular, but seeing like those people, like those people that like that this kind of thing is targeted towards, like young teenage boys, even in Brazil, like the things that those people like say about me or to me, like it's the minority, and I don't pay much attention to it, but like I see it firsthand, like it's really bad, like what they say to like a young teenage girl making content just to entertain people, like the things that they say. If I try and make like even like just a somewhat casual political joke, like it's, I mean, I had somebody, a 14-year-old boy, tell me that he hoped that 9/11 would happen to me. It's ridiculous, and obviously I don't put any stock into it, like it's ridiculous, but I think that that's an example of like, I don't know, just like these people like don't like think about like what they're saying. They think it's so funny. And
right. And okay, so thanks, Sophia. And I want to move you, I think I'm going to kind of challenge you now, as I do with my students, because this is about, let me share the PowerPoint. Okay. So what we're talking about is examples of racing slang words, right? Do you know examples of, besides the ones we've been talking about, the ones that you use, that you have used, that you can? Especially because we're moving now to a different kind of language that has race built in, that conveys racial messages, but from a different perspective.
So I don't think it counts as slang anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm from Rio Grande do Sul,
right?
And I only realized what I was saying once I left Brazil. It never occurred to me that so the dessert that everyone else in Brazil calls brigadeiro,
right?
We call it negrinho.
Right.
And until I came to the United States in 2012 and started interacting with a lot of people that were not from my state, that was only then I realized where that came from, because the thing was developed as an homage to a Air Force brigadier in Brazil,
right?
Who was a Black person, and everyone, well, let's call it the little brigadier. Why did people in my state decided to call it? That's one of the horrible examples of my own.
So it should be clear to everybody now that this is a racist, racist language, right? Now I'm moving to, and this is where the challenge is going to be. Now, let me show you these. Are anybody familiar with these terms on the left?
Yeah, I'd say they're all fairly common, especially on Twitter.
Yeah. And do you want to give us any particular one that you know the meaning that you want to share?
Yeah, actually, just in my last class before this, it's an American Lit class, and we were discussing if a specific female author in the 1600s was a Karen, which is like slang for a stereotypical entitled white woman. Usually, like, this conjures up an image of a woman who will call the police on, let's say, like Black people just for being at a barbecue, and she oversteps and thinks there's an issue when there isn't one, and she tries to like abuse her perceived authority over them.
Right. And these are terms used mostly by people of color, right?
I have something to add based off of like Karen as well, because my mom's name is Karen.
Uh-huh.
And often, and she's like the sweetest lady that I know, and she does so much for like my friends and I. And then like when I'll say something and for some reason like come out that my mom's name is Karen, I like have to explicitly explain that she's not the Karen.
Right.
And
Right.
she's a very sweet lady, but it's just like
Right.
that extra step of like, no, she's really nice. Like she doesn't display these Karen qualities, if that makes sense.
It won't last, Elizabeth. Don't worry.
Is everybody following? It's important that
that one's
everybody
not gonna
follows
stick.
this conversation now, because that's going to be the key thing, including something that Isis and I were talking about, racism and reverse racism, right? And we have already in another presentation, we kind of debunked the idea that there is such a thing as reverse racism. And this is exactly where we're, the language of, and this is language of anti-racism, not language of racism, right? We're moving to the language of anti-racism. But it might strike to somebody, oh my God, this is reverse racism, right? Thoughts? So we already understood one, Becky or Karen, right? And any other that you know that you want to help everybody to understand what it means?
I know mayonnaise boy is literally just talking about a white boy, but mayonnaise because, you know, the color of this, like the skin being white. And also, like Jared's saying, yeah, YT in the chat. YT literally just means, it's like another way of saying white, like similar to like white with the asterisk in the middle, not actually wanting to fully say white, but just like YT, yeah.
But why the asterisk, you know?
I know, like when if I ever do something like that, like I know there's another common one that's like Trump with like an asterisk over either the U or the M or whatever. I know I do it personally because if you do that, if someone searches on Twitter the word Trump, your tweet, like nothing that you post that will come up, because you don't have the full word in there. So it's like basically like avoiding a way of like adding, like say like if enough people don't do it, then Trump doesn't trend on Twitter one day, or like trend being like, you know, being super popular one day on Twitter. I don't know if that's exactly the only reason, but like that's a reason that I've heard about the use of asterisk to replace a letter in between.
Yeah.
Or also maybe considering it as like a type of curse word as well.
Yeah, it's like it's shameful.
Right. There you got it, right? So
Well,
sometimes
not only
what
that,
happens
I
when you
think it
use
goes
a curse
out of,
word, you use asterisk to replace the vowels, right?
a lot of that I think grows out of old gaming sites that had a world chat or a group chat or a global chat feature. So if you're playing a game online and there's somebody moderating, or if there's not a person but I don't know, an algorithm checking to make sure that people are respecting the rules of the game with the language that they use. So a way to get around it, right? To avoid writing a curse word or whatever words would block you temporarily from chatting or permanently from chatting. So you learn to write in this way to.
So it's a critique.
And it's interesting because it's not an example of self-censorship.
Right.
It's a
critique of whiteness, correct?
What's that?
This is a critique of whiteness.
No, I think what I'm trying to say is that this grows out of a desire to continue to express racist language, but to subvert any kind of program or person.
Okay, it could be, but this is, let me clarify something. This is language used by a lot of African Americans, Latinos,
indigenous,
Mexican Americans, people of color use, this is youth language too, from the oppressed groups. Those who are using these words here are the oppressed people in the oppressed groups.
Right. I'm just suggesting that this strategy has some roots in the chatting online.
Right. But what I wanted you guys to think about it, this is language used by people in the oppressed groups, African Americans, for example, right?
Got it.
I have a question about how about in Brazil? Do we have similar terms used to kind of minorities that do have like this meaning? Which ones are they?
Let me stop here now, so that I'd love to see your face. Yeah, okay. Who
for
said
Bolsonaro, there are like several different changes now to his name. It's very important not to get him trending in any way. I've seen it also for branco. So you remove one letter for the word, and Winnie Bueno has been posting a lot, using it a lot. Let me just see if I can check her feed and find some examples.
There's a lot of people posting examples on the chat. I love that.
I can kind of try to explain woke if we want that. That's kind of like a hit at kind of racist people and stuff, where I know, like, for instance, I was talking to a friend and she was talking about like some guy she started talking to and she was excited about it, and she went, oh, and he's woke, which is awesome, because he was very in tune with like what is going on with like the feminist ideals and anti-racism stuff, and so kind of more liberal, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's a hit, at least in America, on the conservative. Yeah. So like generally
who's conscious of racism, right?
Yeah. So generally you want to be woke in America.
Right.
In some circles, I feel like it's actually an opposite. It's a dig at white folks who think they're tuned into things correctly when they continue to be problematic in the ways they do things because they think they're so woke. So it's a dig at that of white people who think they know what's going on and they don't.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I know in a lot of my personal circles when oh, I'm sorry, I just blinked. Oh, never mind. Like my mind just lost track. But I also wanted to say another thing. I'm so sorry. But when we first started talking about this discussion, I realized that like a lot of my Spanish terms were coming to me, and like growing up being like called negrita my whole life. And, you know, like when being called that by my own family members, I recognize it as a term of like endearment and love. You know, I know it's a nickname to me. I'm like one of the more darker people in my family, so it's just what my nickname was. However, it's very different when used in more social settings. So, you know, when you see people of color walking down the street, a lot of people in Spanish would refer to them as like morenos, morenas, or negritos, negritas, stuff like that. But it is a very discriminatory term, you know, in that type of sense. And then it kind of does flip, because I was also thinking like, do we have words like that for white people? Like I was trying to think like, what do we call them? Besides like blanco or blanca, whatever. But I know a lot of times, which honestly, like I do use a lot myself, if I'm being honest, would be like güerito, güerita. And that is a little bit more of like saying, oh yeah, someone just mentioned it. That is a little bit more, I don't want to say discriminatory, but it is a bit harsher of a word to refer to someone as. And I think a lot of people have been using it a bit more now because, you know, people, like a lot of Americans, so blanco, blanco, or blanco and blanca means gringo. They kind of, they know those terms. So I feel like people are starting to turn to güerito more now.
Great, thank you. But one important thing that I want to, before we move to the next one, is that these are not racist. This is not reverse racism. It has to be clear to us that this is actually the opposite, right? These are challenges to racism. Okay, and then we can have a whole section just about why reverse racism is not possible. But I want to move a little faster now because I think we have 10 more minutes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let me, so that we can get ahead here. how to be an anti-racist. Right? So let's watch this together. And then I think I'm going to have to do this again and then share again so that I can do this. Okay, are you ready? There you go. Play.
An anti-racist views the racial groups as equal. An anti-racist puts forth policies that create racial equity. So here are 5 tips on how we can be anti-racist. Tip 1, for us to stop denying that we have racist ideas, that we're in some ways supporting racist policies, that we are being at times racist. That's the first step, right? Because denial is the heartbeat of racism. We have to be constantly self-reflecting on ourselves, constantly self-critiquing ourselves, because that's what anti-racists do. While racists, they deny. No matter what they say, they turn around and say, oh, I'm the least racist person anywhere in the world. So tip 2 is confession. It's confessing the racist ideas we've consumed over the course of our lifetime. It's hard to grow up in a society where racist ideas are constantly being rained onto our head and to never get wet. And so for us to acknowledge that and recognize that and begin the path to being anti-racist by confessing the ideas that we have consumed and even expressed. Tip 3 is defining terms. If racism essentially leads to racial inequity through policy, then anti-racism essentially leads to racial equity. And the reason why that's critical is so as we're going along this journey, we can assess our ideas. We can assess the policies we're supporting and not supporting. We can assess ourselves in each moment. People change. From one moment, they can be saying something that's racist, so they're being racist. The next moment, they can be saying something that's anti-racist, so they can be anti-racist. It's not a fixed tattoo. It's not a fixed identity. It's not a label. It's literally who we are. But in order for us to know who we're being in each moment, we have to have those basic definitions. And then tip 4 is once we start to release ourselves from racist ideas, from this notion that there's something wrong with particular racial groups, then we begin to see that the problems of racial inequities all around us are not racial groups. We begin to see, and we should look for, the racist policies that are actually causing those racial inequities. We should uncover those policies in our institutions, in our neighborhoods, in our states, in our nations. Tip 5, we shouldn't just identify those racist policies. We should figure out who has the power to remove those policies, who has the power to put in place anti-racist policies. What organizations are actually challenging that power? Or who's running a campaign to get into that position of power so they can transform those policies? And we, as individuals, can join those organizations or financially support those organizations, or join those campaigns or financially support those campaigns to ensure we are being part of the movement that challenges racist policies and replaces them with anti-racist policies.
Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we don't have time to go back to the in small groups, but I'd like to share something with you that I do in my class, right? And so students work on these tips, and here's so they study the list and stuff, and then at the end, they'll make signs. I want to show you the signs, right? And this is what the students come up with. Are you able to see this, to read these?
Yeah.
so they spend quite a bit of time looking on and picking stuff, and then each group makes a list of things that they can, how to be an anti-racist, right? Let me give you some time to read over these, and then. So these are little whiteboards that our collaborative learning spaces have, so students can write and then they can put display so everybody can read, right? And
very insightful ideas, yeah.
And they are preparing this for the event that I told you on November 20th, and there's more here. See? Decolonize mind, life, acknowledge your privilege. Some they repeat, right? Use your privilege to fight back. And more. So, and then the next step, what they do is, I'm gonna have to show you because it's a physical thing. And here what these signs look like. Let me show you. Can you all see it? So they build with the wood and the thing. So they build the signs, and we stick these signs on the grass in the mall, in the middle of campus, right? During the day of the Brazilian Consciousness Day. So they have, like for example, see, anti-racism doesn't have to be a constant battle. So, so basically,
share a little bit about
what
they're. Can you share a little bit about people's reactions as they're walking through campus and they see these signs? And
it's very interesting because initially we were concerned a little bit about the reactions. We haven't had any bad reactions at all. There's one time that we also did a little, I invited people to like a Q&A session on the mall that people could ask questions and stuff. And there was one student that was kind of challenging through the questions and stuff. And then at the time we got concerned because they started videotaping people. So we didn't know, but it was just it was nothing. It was just, he was just disagreeing with everything, you know what I mean? But it was okay, you know, that it was actually great that we ended up having a very big conversation about race and racism, comparing his questions about comparing Brazil and the US, and then it turned out to be very productive. It was the only case that I remember that people were a little concerned, especially, so why are you taping? Why are you taking pictures of it? You know what I mean? People, but it has been very, and it's important because this is what we're teaching students. This is part of taking action. By making these signs and going there and putting on the mall, they are actually translating the whole thing from the classroom, from the discussion, from the learning, from taking quizzes to actually taking action, right? And using the language of anti-racism. Now, it is important for them when they get, for the students, when they get to this point, to understand the difference between, that's why I showed that racist language and anti-racist language, and a whole discussion about that it's not, they have to feel comfortable that what they're doing is not racism in reverse, right? They have to understand that that it's not possible, right? So that it's a step for students to feel comfortable to confront racism through language and through, without being fear, oh, so maybe I'm being, especially in people of color, right? I want to be engaged in reverse racism that sometimes students say they right? So we have, still have a few minutes, a couple minutes if you want to say something or to ask a question.
One of the ones that I liked that stood out to me, it was the first on one of the posters that said, don't just be not racist, be anti-racist. So I really liked the act of just going out to campus and actually taking action and making an impact.
Right. What I'm going to do next time that I teach live is they're going to organize the whole event, because it used to be that we basically organize the event with their help, and now it's going to be part of their class project. They'll have the responsibility for organizing the whole event on the mall, the way they want to do it. You know what I mean? Of course, with proper mentorship, so that we know these things have to be very clear to them, what racism, anti-racism, and stuff. So that they feel confident to go public about it, right? And a lot of them want to do, but they don't know how to do it because they haven't had training in terms of anti-racism. They don't belong to any organizations, right? That they're able to speak in public with confidence about, to challenge racism. So it's really training students how to be able to do that in their own lives and stuff, with confidence. To learn the language of anti-racism.
I don't know how this would all translate into a Brazilian context. I mean, I'm old enough and lived enough to know that no nation, no people has cornered the market on racism. But I think there's two issues that I think for our times now with social media, particularly, that are really important that came out in those signs, were two things. One was, which I think are hard to balance, the self-awareness component, right? Understanding our own positions, subject positions in a racialized world, right? Mm-hmm. Not just racist, right? So those comments, understand your own privilege. So that self-awareness component. But then the other side, which I think makes the balancing act a little difficult, but very important, is the comments that addressed actions and not individuals, right? So I think part of what being anti-racist means is not decoupling yourself from the problem, but understanding that things that are systemic, if it's a systemic kind of racism that we're targeting, that you're going to address it through actions and policies and practices, right? Not individuals. And those two things, I think, sometimes don't seem to seem to maybe almost move in opposite directions, right? On the one hand, it's important to understand how everybody is involved. Everybody is circumscribed by a systemic racist, right, society, systemically racist society, and how we are participating in that. But at the same time, not single out individuals. I mean, I think in North American society today, that's what's being exploited to not make progress into, right, this idea of denial being the heartbeat of racism, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I think keeps a lot of people from understanding this or being able to cope with it or even talk about it, is this idea that as soon as it comes up, they feel like they're being personally involved, personally attacked. So those messages I thought were very insightful on the part of the students to say, look, what we're dealing with are actions and policies and not individuals.
Right. And the other thing, one of the first things my students learn is you never face somebody and says you're racist.
Right.
It doesn't work. Don't ever do that, right? That's not a language of anti-racism. The language of anti-racism is you say, oh, what you just did is racist.
Right.
That works much better. For example, a joke is say, I don't feel comfortable with that joke. That joke is racist. Mm-hmm. Never, I tell my students, never ever look at somebody and says, you are racist, because it's not going to work. Right? That's part of the learning how to tackle these problems in a productive way instead of just shutting it down, right? And,
Yeah, so just contextualizing the work of Tom Zé among other Brazilians that have been very active lately, like in this, so some of the audience here is composed of students of Lucia and mine, and this week, they read this little booklet called The Little Anti-Racist Manual. Now, this little book, Jonathan, it's extremely It's written by Jamila Ribeiro, right? You can buy online Kindle for under $1, no? And it's very accessible, but most important thing, during this last year, it has been as #1 bestseller. So this says a whole lot, no? And that is like what you are bringing up is precisely what she brings up from the beginning, no? And the understanding of structural racism and how you can contribute, how everybody needs to contribute. What is your role? Let's talk about branquitude, whititude, no? So, yeah. So there are changes. There are positive changes in the midst of all this.
Okay, I can stay longer and talk if you guys going to talk, stay a little bit more, you know what I mean? But I know your time is 10:35 already, right?
Let's just see take one more question from the students. Mika já tá indo. Tchau, tchau. Don't feel
if no one has anything, I'm just curious about the pedagogical tools that you use to get students from the beginning of the semester where they're like, oh, I don't know how to talk about racist language. And then in November, they're ready to go out and then plant these signs and defend that people should not be racist. And
you didn't participate in the lecture Tom Zé gave last semester, did you, Leila?
No.
That was precisely what he did. And Lucy and I thought it would be great if he would be the first one, the first guest speaker, almost the third, no? But yeah, that's what he did.
There's a video online, right, of that, right? But
yeah, connected to CLAS, sure. Yeah, you
let's see if I understand your question. How the process of getting students to be able to feel comfortable are using anti-racist language? Is it your question?
Yeah, and like, is your demographic in that class, is it mostly white students or students of color, and how is that? How do you teach those students?
Very diverse. In this semester, I'm teaching 2 versions of this class. One class for the Honors College, which is a colloquium, 1 credit. And I have the full version too. Usually I have 40 students. It's very diverse. And the interesting feedback that I get, I get a lot. I just got it from a student. My white students usually say that sometimes they go through they're already in their early 20s. They said, I had never had the chance to sit and talk with a person of color, with a Black person, about racism, the impact of those things on their lives. So they go through this process in this class, right? Or working. It's important. It's great that the class is diverse. And the other thing is they do these projects together to identify. They begin. The class is to teach them how to identify racial violence. The goal, it's not so much about the Black movement or the Black Lives Matter movement, but to give students the tool to be able to identify how race plays a role in a form of structural violence, to identify, right? For example, if we can think about the whole challenge of the elections now, right? How to be able to say, this is about race. When they say this election was stolen, they are again, who's stealing the elections, right? Blacks, Latinos, Asians, Asian Americans, right? So to be able to identify the racial component in this, oh, they are stealing the elections from us. Who these they are, right? It was to help students understand this was all about race. Right? Especially the whole challenge to Georgia elections, right? It was all about race there, right? So this is what the class, so they do, that's why by November 20th, we're already moving to the last, is just before Thanksgiving. So they have been mostly equipped at working groups, right? And also by constant monitoring. So I look what their productions, we discuss about it, we change language, we together, it's really this to me, that's why it works really well in the collaborative learning space, because they know everything that comes out of their class is a collaborative project. And
but what I heard in Leila's question, I think, was something along the lines of, how can I use something like this in my classes? She's about to defend, become a doctor and fly away. So like I would suggest Leila and others to find the link for Tonze's first lecture last November or October, and you would get many excellent ideas on how to break the ice and how to start addressing these taboo issues.
Mm-hmm. And also, Leila, if you notice what I did today, started with pointing out in very like a song about structural violence. We talked about a lot about racial violence in that song by MVBU. From there, you say, see how relevant this thing is to is. This is what we're doing, and then you go into. I went into those examples of they're very current of extremist language, right? From there, you introduce the language of anti-racism, because it's clear to students that those are two different things. That's why I pointed out so often, do you see the difference that this is race, this is extremism, racist, and this is like when you talk about woke, when you talk about mayonnaise, these are language that used by people of color, and this is not reverse racism. They're not, it's actually anti-racism. So that you kind of have the to scaffold for students, go like step by step, make sure they manage one point, and then you go. Teaching this class has really, I think every semester I think I get better, because I don't remember, maybe the first time I taught was a disaster. I can't remember, right? Because it's always like that as teachers. We learn every semester, but it's always think about the steps, the scaffolding, right? They have to do this step first. Don't throw, if you throw them into the deep end, you might get, it won't work, right? I guess it's true for anything we teach as educators, right? But yeah, I would, and I'll be happy to work with you whenever if you need to say, well, what should we teach first? What's the next step? What's the next step to get there where we want to get, right? Or you establish like goals and enabling goals in your yeah. Mm-hmm. But anybody can do. We just need to try. As I said, my first one was probably a disaster, right? But then and also, yeah, we all can do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your generosity, Tonze.
Oh, I'm happy, really happy to do this.
And
I hope it was useful, right?
Yes, and remember that his book is coming out by Rutgers University Press, and I think will be a great opportunity for you to take advantage of that book as well. It relates to Brazilians and the situation in Brazil, but it applies to what we have been discussing here anyhow.
Right. And the title Between Brown and Black is exactly how Brazilians, between brown and black, they are embracing anti-racism. I try to show that how there is a change underway, and a lot of backlash too, but yeah.
Well, it's the beginning of this dialogue that we started last year, and we hope it will continue throughout the next year, this year, and so on.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Nos encontramos em carne e osso no futuro próximo com as várias outras pessoas lindas que fazem parte dessa série. Aí sim, daí vai ser festa.
Obrigado, obrigado pelo convite de novo.
Imagina.
Nada, bem-vindo.